Hello. Presenting this session, Quality in Use, with the subtitle Meet the Needs of Users. My name is Changdeuk Hwa. A short introduction of myself. I am part of the Fintech QA team and I carried out the task for Bitfront, our cryptocurrency exchange, and Line Bank, Taiwan, Thailand, Indonesia, and so on. And now I'm carrying out QA engineering task and working with Japan Bank QA team members, and I'll leave it at that. Today, in this short period of time, I'll be presenting on how we quantify the areas where the users use the service and our team's experience on how we analyze the quantified metrics. Let's start. I think all of you would have learned through theories, journal articles, and books that the perspective of the provider and the users are different. Looking at this from the QA side, while we are focusing on improving the quality of a product, our users are evaluating our products with a different viewpoint. So it's a well-known story that such difference in perspectives exist. However, from a QA's point of view, because this difference affects the quality of service, we need to understand why this difference occurs and try to find a way to measure and improve the quality of the service from the user's perspective. So we try to find a way to improve the quality of service from their point of view. User perspective is a term frequently used in UX and design. However, in QA, we execute black box testing in terms of this perspective, and it's a big part of the test that we carry out. We analyze UX and business flow to evaluate the risks and write the test scenarios from the user perspective. We also make suggestions of improvements to usability during testing. However, is black box testing really testing from the user's viewpoint? We didn't think so. I'm going to go into why that was and why it is difficult for us, the provider, to design and execute tests from the viewpoint of the users. We consciously build and test our product with certain purposes and expectations. On the other hand, users use some of the service features unconsciously. From the provider's point of view, who has an understanding of the entire system, they might mistakenly think that users will be able to use it conveniently like this. In the end, we predict that the users will use the system based on our expectation of how the user experience would be like. But it is very difficult for the users without an understanding of the entire system to use a service in accordance with our expectation of the user experience that they will have. Therefore, rather than making decisions from a provider's viewpoint, we have to look at how the service would be used from the same side as the users. But this is easier said than done. Aside from the reason I've already mentioned, from a tester's perspective, knowing all of this spec and having tested the service many times creates inertia, making it difficult to recognize problems. So instead of this ambiguous term user perspective, we have to analyze the actual experience of the users. There are basically many theories to analyze these, but as far as I know, it is very difficult to measure the service quality from the user perspective because as a default, it is subjective. Data is hard to collect. And because the user, who is the subject of measurement, is a variable factor. Many methods are suggested, however, a clear standard for online service is not present. So the resulting factors such as success in business or the number of active users are used to evaluate the quality of service. However, there are limits in using these resulting factors to measure what is quality. And from a QA standpoint, the one who has to provide guidance on quality, measuring product quality using those factors is meaningless as it's difficult to find ways of improvement based on what is measured. So in order for our test to be more meaningful, we thought it would be important to know the quality of context in use. During this process, we came across the term quality in use and found out that it has been researched in the field of QA for some time. In terms of standard, as you see on the right, definitions and ways to measure the 5 characteristics on the right have already been defined. This concept sometimes gets mixed up with usability, but usability focuses on convenience of use, whereas quality in use focuses on more of an overall quality of use. So we found the standard and researched relevant documents. but we didn't get many references. We thought that this would be easy to implement if even the method of measurement had been standardized, but perhaps due to the difficulty of measuring service quality as it was explained, only academic research was being carried out. To give you some more explanation, the activities for quality in use gets carried out after a service has been launched, meaning that it is not measured before a service is launched, but rather it measures the quality as it is evaluated by the users after a service is deployed to actual operation and makes improvement based on the result of that measurement. During that process, the part marked with the question mark is undecided as to who will carry out that activity. Even if the QA part leads the measurement from a quality perspective, future analysis and improvements can be accomplished by only QAs, so we are still thinking about the processes involved for improvement. What we hope to gain through these activities is periodically measuring quality from users' point of view and finding out what we can do based on the result, improving our service overall. And to accomplish what we find most valuable, making the customer happy. To that end, we proceeded as follows. As we gained knowledge about quality in use, we started the preparation measurement. We defined the measurement method, selected LinePay and Thailand's bank service as pilot services and measured weekly, then made improvements in measuring method and metrics. The hardest part was the ambiguous standard and lack of references and the existence of little base data for measurement. With the ambiguous standard, we started to define our own way by interpreting standards, selecting metrics, and measuring them. And we began seeking for methods that we could apply to the data that we had at hand. The method used to research the satisfaction of general users and analyze the use patterns are questionnaires and user tests, which analyze while recording actual user behavior. Both are attractive, but these are tasks that are difficult and expensive to carry out to the extent that there are disciplines for each method. Therefore, these tasks are very difficult to carry out in a short cycle. Consequently, we decided to measure API log, GA data when possible, and VOC data, which can be measured and analyzed periodically. But it was difficult to analyze user behavior based on general API logs because the purpose of the logs is to quickly figure out problems in the system during operation. So in order to analyze user behavior, as seen in these bottom images, we mapped user action flows to all of the corresponding APIs. Because the statistical data and API call count and user flow did not match, in order to extract usage statistics by task unit, we collaborated with the development team to review the method of data extraction for a very long time. Also, with GA data, only the parts related to business analysis were implemented, so we added the parts useful for analyzing users' service usage. We analyzed both GA data and API log for Thailand Bank, and we only used API log statistical data for LinePay because GA was not applied to the service for security reasons. Although GA is a great tool, we recommend collecting GA data along with API log statistical data for analytical purposes because various situations of errors users face each step are collected in the API log data. As we revised and improved the measurement methods, we began to define the criteria for measurement of metrics. The table you are seeing here, you could say are our current version of measurement metrics. Looking at the standard metric criteria, then by excluding metrics that are hard to gather, meaning just by looking at the result and the ones that are there only for show, we're creating one that is more compact and valuable. However, because currently we're only working with the data that we have, we think that we should improve the metrics measuring the qualitative part of the users. Now, I will go over the definition and method of measurement of the metrics we use individually. First is effectiveness. Effectiveness is measured to determine whether there aren't any hurdles for the users to reach their goal. Like the figure, when the user clicks on the transfer to friend button, that is considered to be 100, and we measure the ratio of transfers that are completed. We also figure out the drop-off rate at each step, then try to find the reason. This is the most basic metric and a metric that focuses on finding and improving factors that hinder users from accomplishing their goals. Effectiveness is expressed as the ratio of the number of successful attempts to the total number of attempts. In the case of line paste transfer to a friend, task completion ratio is 0.31, meaning that 31% of all attempts have been successful. This figure should not be the subject of absolute evaluation. For that number, the standard could be lowered according to the characteristic of a service or a task. For reference, in case of offline transaction, the success rate is 80%. There are 3 reasons why we analyze using this result. Those are analyzing the reason behind the actual drop-off rate, checking what errors at which step prevent the user from reaching the final step based on the API response log, and lastly, observing the trend to check the influence of the service or surrounding environment on users' goal achievement. The next metric is efficiency. Here, we measure the time taken for a user to reach their goal, and our objective is to find the factors that serve as a hurdle to the users quickly reaching their goal. If it takes a long time for a user to reach their goal, we can figure out where it's taking a long time and try to improve it. The complexities and inefficiencies in UX, and as it is with Fintech services, because money is involved, if there are any text or content related to risk, efficiency metric is affected rather than being caused by the performance of server and front end, which is what we usually think are the causes. This metric can be expressed as a ratio of the ideal time to the actual time taken for the task. The concept of ideal time may be new to some of you. It refers to user experience performance. So internally, the target is 2 seconds to the front-end performance for the measurement. So that is internal criteria. So based on this criteria in user action, the number of steps of actions for requests up to server response is multiplied by 2 seconds for the calculation. The reason why it is expressed as ideal is because it does not consider the time taken for users to think or type in information. So it is considered to be the quickest time a task could be finished. After the efficiency metric is calculated, we check which step took the longest time, then analyze if there is anything that might have inconvenience or confuse the user to make improvements. The measurement of this metric for line paste transferred to a friend is 0.426, which is 42% of the ideal time. It takes the longest time to select a friend. Perhaps it can be improved through UX aspects. Although it is not based on the result of our criteria, a similar format of improvement has already been implemented in the manner of in-chat transfer. So this form of enhancement can improve efficiency. And in the execution log of individual API, if there is a server performance issue due to execution time, this part can be improved. Lastly, by continuously tracing the trend in this way, we can keep checking how the improvement affects the user. Next is freedom from risk. This is a metric measuring how free the user is from risks. It was difficult to choose the items to measure for this metric. The standard lists out various items for measurement from business to system outage. They were ambiguous standards and methods, so we needed a realistic approach. So we additionally define the items based on the available data. We comprise the metric as a ratio of users who faced an error even once to the total number of users who tried. When a user clicks on the transfer button and an unknown error occurs, the users may feel very nervous. Among errors, there may be temporary errors from the system, but it also includes all the error codes defined by us. So actually, from a provider's perspective, a defined error is an expected error, so it tends to not be closely monitored. However, we thought that from the user's perspective, frequently occurring error messages could make the user nervous. So we analyzed the patterns of error message and checked with error message the users see at which step. And even for the defined errors, if it occurs frequently, we could review the idea of UX improvement. By observing this trend, we can figure out the influence of change in service or the surrounding environment. The result of this metric for transfer to a friend is 99.2%, meaning that 99.2% of users successfully made the transfer to their friend without seeing any error message. Since LinePay is already a stable and familiar service, there is little occurrence of error in use or in the system. Last metric is satisfaction. This is the hardest metric to measure via log. Currently, it is calculated using the statistical data of VOC, which expresses users' opinions the most. There are very many variables in the formula, but it is a ratio of the number of VOCs to users of the task and the number of VOCs to all users. It is not simply viewed as a ratio of the number of VOCs, but the number of users of our service and users who tried the task enters into the parameters and composes the formula. To interpret the result, it is difficult to say that 86% of users enjoy or are very satisfied in the process of transfer. But it means that these 86% are using the service without actively voicing any inconvenience or problem. And with VOC, we need to focus and analyze the inquiries that come in due to difficulties in using the service, because problems related to efficiency and effectiveness could come in as inquiries, and we may be able to figure out the cause based on an actual user feedback. And because I think inquiries rather than complaints are more active user feedback. As such, although we are currently measuring using available data, we believe that the current situation is not sufficient in measuring customer satisfaction. So we are doing further reviews on the metrics, and our plan is to discuss with members in numerous parts of the operation to proceed. Like so, we are currently measuring these 4 characteristics. And by creating a single score by task, we are analyzing the trend on a weekly basis. We're still in the initial stage. We are calculating the average of the results, excluding weights or the correlations between the metrics. We plan on improving the formula once we are able to weigh the reliability of each metric and determine the correlation between the metrics. Correlation refers to a form where when one factor improves, it affects the other metrics, and we think that such a relationship will become more evident once more data is accumulated. In the case of LinePay, transferred to a friend, its current quality in use score is 64.5. It's difficult to say it's high or low. Due to the characteristic of the service and task, this number could be hard to raise, but it is a metric that aims to keep on trend or to move upward. As such, our goal is to continuously improve each method of measurement and metric in the process of measuring and reviewing, leading to improvement in the actual service in order to create a practice of quality in use that can be used for reference. Last of all, our focus is, and will be our users. And in terms of QA, we are just adding one point of view of quality rather than throwing away the product quality perspective to switch to a system for quality in use. I think the experience we attain here will get naturally reflected to improve the quality of our products. And I think the part we need to focus on in the product for improvement will become clearer. That was a brief introduction of what we have been doing. We have thought fiercely, and we will continue to do so as we systemize and collaborate with various partners. That concludes my presentation.